everyone to Stopping the Violence. As you know, we've been meeting for this is our 39th week, as gently reminded by our dear sister Nadia. So thank you very much for joining in with us. And I have a note. I have a note from Reverend Oliver. Unfortunately, he's not going to be your host today, but he sends his apologies, and he's hosting an event at the Times Building on the topic of persecuting Christians in Nigeria and the human rights uh, program. So in that process of him not being here, we're gonna carry on. We're gonna give him our best regards. Um, as you know, we meet every week and we talk about stopping the violence, what we can do in our communities, what we can do in our cities and in our states. Today, we have a prominent speaker with an extensive resume, and I think that he is going to be able to just come in and let us know what we need to know and move us forward as God has planned. We know that there is a plan. We know that there is a promise. We know through all of it, it has purpose. So as we move forward today, we have Judge Mark Anderson here to speak to us today. So open up your ears, open up your heart to hear what he has to say. He comes with a plethora of experience. So I know that my eyes and ears are going to be open. My heart is going to be open, and I'm going to be taking notes. So take your notes. If you want to ask questions afterwards, there will be a time for Q&A. Again, Reverend Oliver send his apologies, but he's about his father's business. He's about his father's business because he's handling things. God has put him in a position and he's handling things. So we keep him, in our prayers as we move forward. So I'm just going to read Judge Mark Anderson's bio to give you a little information in reference to where he's coming from and his history. He's the former state legislator and former justice of the peace. Mark Anderson is committed to public service. First elected in the Arizona state legislature in 1994, Mark represented Mesa for 14 years, serving in both the state house and the state senate. In 2010, Anderson was elected to the position of Justice of Peace for the West Mesa Justice Court. In his first year as a judge, Anderson resolved a backlog of over 100 DUI cases that were over a year old. That's good work. Instituted a life skills program for defendants and authored legislation to modernize the justice court statutes. In 2008, Anderson was a Republican candidate for U.S. Congress and Arizona co-chairman of the Mitt Romney for president campaign. In 2006, Representative Anderson prime sponsored legislation to address the meth problem in Arizona. Anderson's bill, which was passed by the legislature and signed by the governor, was a comprehensive approach to dealing with the meth epidemic by allocating resources for interdiction, treatment, and prevention services. In 2003, Representative Anderson was the prime sponsor of legislature, which created a prison transition program to ensure that prisoners returning to society have mentors, employment, and housing at the same time, saving taxpayer dollars being spent to incarcerate nonviolent drug offenders. And we know that type of program is needed all over the world. Representative Anderson also the author of legislation which helped allocate a portion of federal welfare dollars to marriage skills courses. Wow. For the purpose of reducing the number of divorces in Arizona. And that's music to our ears. Representative Anderson was also the prime sponsor of the nation's first tuition tax credit bill for private and public schools passed in 1997. Over the years, this legislation has enabled many parents to send their children to the religious or private school of their choice and provide millions of dollars to public schools for extracurricular activities. Other important bills Anderson authored include a charity tax credit for donors to private nonprofit groups helping low-income citizens, an abstinence education program that reduced teen pregnancy, and a program that encourages churches to assist in the placement of foster children in their communities, among others. Mark has been published numerous times in the Arizona Republic, East Valley Tribune, and appeared in publications such as the Wall Street Journal, Washington Times, and Chicago Tribune. Mark has testified before Congress regarding the issue of strengthening marriages. Mark recently authored his memoir entitled Love People, The True Life Story of Mark Anderson, which is available on Amazon. So you guys can get it. You guys can get it today. Currently, Mark is serving as the Honorary Consul General for Arizona for the Republic of Korea. Judge Anderson is married, and he and his wife, Lucia, have 3 children, Kendra, Ned, and Ethan, and 7 beautiful grandchildren. You know, he is an example. He is the example of community. He's the example of parenting. He has set himself in position not to just talk about it, but to be about it. So we thank him for all the work that he has done as far as being the former state representatives. He developed policy development, committee chairmanship, stakeholder process strategies. The man, from his bio, is just phenomenal. So he has been a contributing factor to the community. He has been a pillar of his community. So without further ado, hold on, I see Reverend Oliver somewhere. But without further ado, Judge Mark Anderson, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, and greetings, everyone. Good to see you, Zagri, and looks like a very distinguished group. I think whenever I give a talk in the future, I'm going to ask Dr. Madeline to introduce me. It's obvious she doesn't really know me that well, but I like her spirit. So this morning, I see that you guys are working on a tough issue, and that is the issue of neighborhoods and crime and improving our community. And these are all things that you can't just snap your fingers and make things happen. It's really a difficult issue. So I really congratulate you for taking that on. And I hope to provide just a little information about what things I'm aware of that have been done here. I have 3 different issues, I guess I'll talk about today, and then hopefully this will be mostly a conversation and discussion rather than me giving a long talk. So the first thing I'll talk about is the prison transition legislation that I got through a few years ago, and that was interesting because I was chairing a committee on homelessness, and at one of our meetings, a woman came in and said, well, I'm with the homeless shelter, and every week a van pulls up in front of our shelter and the doors open and a few guys fall out of the van and it drives away. And those are people getting out of prison. And they have $50 in their pocket, and they have a little ID card that says offender in red letters. And somehow this is supposed to help these guys make it in the real world. And obviously the $50 doesn't last too long because they're on the street corner with a drug dealer on this end and a prostitute on this end. So pretty soon the $50 is gone and they walk into the homeless shelter because that's where they've been dropped off. I said, is this really our transition program? Is this how we're helping people as they get out of prison? And in fact, it was. So we went to work, and over 2 years with a bunch of stakeholders working on this issue, we came up with the transition plan. And the plan was that if someone who's in prison, a year before they get out, they get to sit down, and if they qualify, they get to sit down and meet with people who are mentors, who can help them, understand their situation. Like, do they need drug treatment? Do they need counseling? Do they need job training? What's the situation with their family? Are they going to go back? Do they have a place to live? All these kind of basic questions that if you don't have the answers to, just being dropped off on a street corner is not going to help. So if they complete the program, the incentive is they get to get out 90 days early than what their normal time of release would have been. So that's a good incentive. And a lot of people really realize that they need help, that they want actually to be able to be successful on the outside. And so they take advantage of these different programs that we were offering. And it was paid for by the fact that people were getting out 90 days early. So that's 90 days of costs less per person in the program. So it actually ended up being a savings to the state to do this kind of program and offer all these services to people to help them so that when they got out, they would also have people on the outside as mentors that would be established ahead of time. So the recidivism rate was reduced significantly. And the only problem we had, so to speak, was that the Department of Corrections didn't really embrace this idea. And I realized that it's partly the philosophy of the people who run, like the Department of Corrections. They don't see the prisoners they see them as the enemy. And so they don't want them to succeed. I mean, if you ask them, of course, they'll say, yes, of course we do. But in reality, their approach is not to be really anxious to help these guys succeed. Nevertheless, it's been in place for quite a while now. And the result, I believe, has been very, very positive in our state. And so that's one thing that I think if it's not in place in your state, you could look into it. I could send the legislation and you could take a look at how it might work in your state if it's not already there. The second thing I want to talk about is the charity tax credit that Dr. Madeline mentioned. This is something that is really probably one of my favorite pieces of legislation, because what it does is there are a lot of great nonprofit organizations out there that are helping low-income people. Probably some of you on this call are actually running one of those nonprofits. And the tax credit is that a person can donate to your nonprofit organization if you're helping low-income people and get a 100% tax credit, which means if I give you $400 to the Salvation Army, for example, then I reduce my taxes by $400. So essentially, it doesn't cost me anything to give you $400 because it reduces my tax bill by that exact amount. So it's a really incredible incentive, and it really helps low-income people because these organizations can collect, they can do really well fundraising because they can tell donors, hey, it doesn't cost you anything. So that's been in place for over 20 years now. And as far as I know, we're the only state that has it. And it has resulted in literally tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars going to local nonprofit organizations to help low-income people, whether it be a Salvation Army or even just a smaller entity in your neighborhood. The way I was able to get this passed, I told legislators, would you rather give $200 to the state government to fund programs after it goes through all the levels of bureaucracy? Or would you rather give $200 to the local church pantry down the street who's doing a phenomenal job helping people with their issues? And everybody realized this is a better way to go. So that's the second thing I'll talk about. And then the last thing is, I did get elected as a judge for Maricopa County, which is the 4 million people county here in the Phoenix area. And one of the things I realized pretty early on is that as people come before you as a judge, you begin to realize that these are not all bad people. They're not all evil super criminals. These are people who oftentimes came from difficult life situations. They had trauma. Maybe they were bullied. Maybe they had no parents at home. They don't really know why they sometimes make bad decisions. They just do. And so I realized, there's got to be a better alternative than just giving a fine or a jail sentence to somebody. That's not really going to help them. They already know what they did was wrong, per se. So I created a life skills program, and it was a program that I found and had this very special teacher who could provide the classes. And it talked about why people make decisions and how does childhood trauma affect your perception when you're trying to make choices. And a lot of people who went through the program told me, they said, that's the first time I ever realized, I even thought about why I make choices and why I do the things that I do. And so I gave this as kind of an alternative. In other words, people would come before me and I'd say, okay, well, maybe they'd have a trial and they'd be found guilty of some crime, misdemeanor of some kind. And I could say, well, you can either have a couple of days in jail and a $500 fine, or you can take a life skills class. Which would you rather do? So I would give them the option. It became very popular for some reason. And so people took it and they really felt it was so much more beneficial than if I had just given them a fine or something like that. And so I think we have to recognize that a lot of the things that we do, either as elected officials, lawmakers, or people who represent the criminal justice system, is we're providing sort of band-aids. We're trying to address, especially when you're creating laws, 95% of the laws that we create are really about controlling 5% of the population. The vast majority of people don't need these kind of laws. Mm-hmm. But the question is, how do you get to the root of the problem? Rather than just putting more band-aids on it and saying, well, these are your sentences, or this is what we're going to do. I think we have to really look at how it is that people got into these difficult situations in the first place. And it always comes back to the family and dysfunctional families, and that people don't really grow up in homes where they receive the kind of love that they should. So they value themselves and they value others. So that's another topic. I think I'm pretty much running out of time here. So I just want to say that I think at the end of the day, addressing the issue of marriage and family and giving young people through education the right kind of love and appreciation and life perspective is really going to get more to the root of the issue. And then you'll have less crime, less problems down the road. If people feel they're valued and they're loved and they have a future, then they're less likely to get involved in gangs and drugs and all that. That's what happens when people don't feel that. So at the end of the day, it's really tough to address those root issues, especially through legislation. But we have to keep trying. We have to keep making effort and ensuring our future generations grow up feeling that they have hope and that this is a place where they can fulfill their dreams. And so on that note, I think I'll just stop there and then open it up if you guys have any questions or comments, etc.
Yeah, put my friend Madeline Clark back on. I made it for some reason the group of people that are working with on this conference, which was dealing with violence, you know, and the violence that we don't see that's not on our home base, but in other countries that just, you know, just wrenches your heart. And it's the persecution of Christians in Nigeria. And you hear these horror stories. It just breaks your heart. Dr. Madeline, we need to talk a little bit because, and we go back to the church. And I think Christianity, American Christianity, has a power base that we don't use that will help in other areas, you know, and especially in Nigeria. The Black church is very central to so many things that we were discussing. So we'll talk a little later, but thank you, Mark. You know, Mark, I'm so used to another platform with you on A Higher Purpose. I almost didn't notice you. Guess what? I didn't even notice the name until I saw you. You know, Mark, only until I heard your voice did I realize it was the Mark Anderson that I've been on the platform with for a long time. Isn't that amazing? But thank you so much for what you shared. And I think the Higher Purpose, we also discussed trauma, you know, and I greatly appreciate, you know, that a root causes a lot of ill behavior stems from, you know, trauma. And on all bases, Black, white, yellow, there's always some trauma attached to, you know, these outbreaks of bad behavior. And then these interests of what we've been doing, Mark, is that these different traumas have been categorized based on, you know, cultural experiences, you know, but they all lead to the same road, you know, so bad behaviors and, you know, irrational behaviors that trigger itself into, you know, crime and picking up what I call inanimate objects. Also, you just discussed so nicely about, you know, this recidivism problem. And that is another issue that I appreciate that you address. You know, give $50 and you just kick them out. All they know is, yeah, you know, I haven't had a woman in a long time. Go, you know, maybe a little touch of drugs. And $50 seems like a lot at that moment, but in the next moment it's gone and they're back at square one, you know. So, and I really appreciate you coming on. I just like marvel over listening to you, and I read your bio also. I don't know why it never I never associated you. Why? Because, you know, when he's on A Higher Purpose, I never seen him in a tie. I never seen him. He's always so casual, you know. So great. Thank you, Dr. Madeline, for coming on and you know, sharing with us. And of course, you can make any remarks and as in a response as we open up the gate for other people to share what they are feeling as well.
Okay, I'm just gonna say real quick. I understand the prison system. I worked in the prison system for 13 years. As a CEO and founder of House of Judah Empowerment Outreach Ministries, we had a reentry program, and one of our components was more than a bus pass. You know, because we wanted to help them get their state IDs, their birth certificates, whatever they needed to get to an area where they could apply for the job. Could they go back to the community of what, you know, where they came from? So I appreciate that program. And my question, you've answered it already about the recidivism. You know, I know it had to go down, and to be able to offer that life skill program was uh, monumental, you know, for someone that really have the heart that want to make a change and want to do something different. There is a collective group of people that's in prison. They're not all bad. They've done some bad things, but they're not all bad people. And having that positive role model, that positive mentor, whether you're 18 or 80, if you have a support system, you're more subject to be successful once you leave the prison system. I wanted to comment on the charity tax. I wanted to comment on the charity tax because that's major. You know, just in human nature, you look for that exchange. You know, sometimes we just give freely from our heart, but sometimes we look for that exchange. We give something, we want to get something back. So that charity tax, I'm sure your community was happy with that. And I'm sure they just felt like giving so much more away. You know, when we clean up, we clean out for spring, or we clean for Christmas, or, you know, some sort of holiday. But I'm sure with that initiative, the cleaning went a little faster and was a little more organized to be able to get rid of these things, and again to be able to file them on your taxes. So that in itself make a difference in the community. The fact that you said we have to get to the root of the problem, you're absolutely right. And like Reverend Oliver said, it's culture. By culture, the root. You know, one root problem might be the broken family. Another culture or community, the root problem might be domestic violence. But even in that, it's a broken family. So you're absolutely right. So as we continue to have these conversations and build, we'll be able to figure out the best practices and be able to address those core root problems. Okay, I'm done.
Thank you. Thank you for that wonderful summation. So nice. Great. Thank you. Okay. Anyone else, please raise your hand or just jump on.
My good friend, Judge Anderson, I have a question on the legislation you had for the charity tax credit. Did you have any opposition to that at all, or was any 100% go for it at the beginning, or how did it go with that kind of presentation?
The opposition came primarily from, in this case, it was the governor's office, because they were worried that if too many people took advantage of this and donated, it would have a significant hit on the overall budget of the state. In other words, if every single taxpayer donated $400 to a charity, then it would reduce the revenue to the state by 400 times 2 million or whatever it was. But I think we were able to overcome that, obviously, because it passed and the governor signed it. So it was sort of an illogical fear that was the main opposition to it, but everybody else could see the value of it once they understood it. That, you know, it's basically redirecting your tax dollars to entities that you actually like and you think will do a good job. So it's from that point of view, pretty much everybody likes that. Oh, I get to choose how I help people with my tax money. I can,
also to see how much it would save over time, or compared to the loss of the taxes, or.
Well, they keep track of it every year, how much money people claim from using the charity tax credit every year. But it is limited. You can only do, I think it's $400 per person or $800 per couple. So you can't, so there is a somewhat of a limit on it, but no, they know exactly how much it costs every year.
Right, but I mean, the recidivism rate was helped out to be less cost to the prison population, prison budget, everything.
Okay, well, that's a whole different thing. You're talking about the prison transition legislation.
Okay.
That turned out to not be a cost to the state. In fact, it was a savings every year.
Right. Okay.
So that's a different topic, though.
Okay.
Can I
Thank
ask you a
you.
question?
Sure.
Mr. Anderson, thank you so much for all that you've accomplished and for setting the standard by which we can depend upon citizens to bring about solutions instead of depending upon government. I also want to thank you for bringing up the notion of life skills training for those who are leaving incarceration. So upon that note, I would like to ask if Dr. Madeline Alexander could share a little bit about what her husband, Reverend Ken Alexander, is accomplishing at the place where he holds such training at his job.
Oh my, well, thank you. Well, thank you, Bill Stoner. And that's a very good question. My husband works with Recycle Force, and they work with ex-offenders. And they come in, whether they're sentenced or whether they've been released from prison, but some of them have a path that they have to go through. So through corrections, they can come into Recycle Force and actually work. And as part of that process of them being employed, it helps them to get housing. They make pretty good money now. I think they're actually up to $15 an hour. So they're actually able to get housing, be productive citizens, whether they're living with their family or whether they have to find a place on their own. But my husband is the training director. And in that training process, he helped to get guys trained in heavy equipment operation, OSHA, electronics. It's just a gambit of things that he does, and he does it very well. He does it very well. They've served thousands of ex-offenders to help them to come back into society. And a matter of fact, they no longer call them ex-offenders, they call them returning citizens. So in that process, in that process, you have guys that succeed and you have those who don't. So when you're talking about life skills, you have to have, there's nothing like a made up mind. You have to have a made up mind that you want to make that change. And a lot of those guys that go through that program have a made up mind that they want to do something different. So they apply themselves, they receive the mentorship, they receive the mental health services, they receive they go through the process that they can actually become successful as they return to society. So thank you, Bill Stoner. Thank you very much. But my husband, he does a very good job. Like I say, he is the training director, and it's a social enterprise. So you have the profit and the nonprofit operating under one roof. And the work that they do is truly amazing. They're affecting lives, not only men, women as well. So, that's a bonus to have the two work side by side. But they come through the program. It's 120 days. Some of them get hired on full time. Some of them go out to other agencies to find, greater employment. But once they leave there with the application of the work that they have done by their hands, they're able to be skillfully employed to the degree where they can have it's not about applying for a job, it's about establishing a career. So if they decide to take that career track, my husband have been a part of the process to give them the tools that they need. So thank you, Bill Stoner.
I wanted to ask a question. Did you finish, Bill?
Well, I just wanted to share that I was deeply moved by Reverend Alexander's testimony to me that he not only gives them job training and the ability to get into society by themselves, but also for those who don't have a good attitude or those who feel like they don't have this personal character strength or whatnot, they're thinking about going back into prison. He shared with me that he can take them under the wing, so to speak, and like a father figure, really kind of help them to recognize that this is the one time in their life they have to deal with reality and kind of strengthen their resolve that they have to make a major change in their life. And he's done some good work with some young men who didn't want to face that, but helped them to make the decision to change their lives so they could become better citizens. So,
Cool. Thank you, Bill. Appreciate that. Yeah, I have a question for both Mark and Dr. Madeline. Listening to your husband's recidivism program, and also you, Mark, the program that you helped devise, what is the percentage of recidivism after they go into these particular programs?
Okay, I can start.
Yeah.
The correct answer is I don't know exactly, because in order to find that out, someone would have to do a study, and no one was, it's funny, at least in some places, funding of a study like that is hard to get. So I don't have the answers. Now, I think I could probably get the answers if I were to contact the Department of Corrections and tell them I was doing a story for a newspaper or something. They might be able to do it, but I wouldn't really even know for sure how you would track it, really. I mean, you would track, the only way to track it is how many of these same people came back, right? Okay, so it shouldn't be that hard, but I don't really have the answer. I only know pretty much from people's personal testimonies and stories of what their experience was and why it worked for them. But maybe Dr. Madeline would know the answer.
Well, like you said, those numbers are hard to get, but it is out there somewhere. And I can't speak to the state of Indiana, but as far as the gentleman that my husband has worked with, the recidivism rate last year had dropped like 89%. So there's very few of their guys that actually return. And reason being is because they have developed that skill and are able to come out of those. They don't necessarily return to where they came from. And we know that that's huge when you release from jail, that you don't have to go back to that same environment. So them being able to, establish those skills, make a decent wage, they don't have to go return to that environment, which changed the trajectory of their path, their journey, because of their skill set that they have received.
Yeah, thank you. I think only reason why I asked that because, based on best practices, what are the percentage of them going in and really capturing these programs without going back? And then what is it that caused them to go back? But anyway, I thank you. Anyone else would like to share? Oh, Reverend Franklin, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Mr. Mark Anderson, thank you so much. And Dr. Alexander, thank you. I really appreciate all the information and all the questions and ideas that have been presented so far. And what I see is God working through this format to empower us to collectively create a community to draft the content, the necessary content that may play a very substantial force towards to create a transformation of public policy dealing with this phenomena of gun violence. Because what it sounds as though from this discourse is the exposure of the underlying cause, which is creating that environment where those things to happen. And I'm learning a lot from this. And again, I really appreciate, Mr. Anderson's expressing the root cause. And all of you have said this in so many words, in so many ways, to address the family situation. Speaking from my personal situation, I grew up in a broken home, and my mom pretty much raised me, and I saw a violent act from my father, did to my mom. Over a period of time, of course, I forgave them both, and it could have been very easy for me to, I guess you can say, critique my mom, because I thought perhaps I didn't get the attention I needed. The bottom line, I had a reference point. I had a reference point of something very substantial that I felt from both of my parents. That was, I was loved. I was loved from my dad, and I was loved from my mom. And unfortunately, what we see consistently in those circumstances that are associated with the environment where gun violence is prevalent, there is an acknowledgement that these children growing up, or men and women who growing up, they don't have that reference point, that they were appreciated and they were loved. I was always able to come back to that, to help me to find the empowerment to be able to work and try to get better. And so I like the idea of researching and developing the specific statistics that is necessary, that could be documented, to find out exactly what is the recidivism rate. And once, and as ad is being presented, it will empower us as citizens to have substantial tools that we can present to our local areas where we live. And we can collectively, as a community, craft a content, an approach book, so that we will be able to be in a position of taking ownership of that. I think that's the bottom line. We, on this community gathered here, listening to this information, I believe there's a calling for us to take ownership. And the more as we do that, then we will see miraculous changes. We will see a positive possibilities of God manifesting miracles in all these areas where it seems as though that is an impossible situation. But we, anointed children of God, have that capacity to be able to manifest those miracles. And thank you so much for the time. Thank you, everybody.
Reverend Oliver, thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. For Indiana, it says for all offenders who recidivated, approximately 32.5 returned to Department of Corrections for the commission of a new crime, compared to approximately 67.5% for technical rule violations of post-release supervision. Male offenders had higher recidivism rates when compared to female offenders. Now that's for the state of Indiana, and this was from records from 2001. So your state, you can find it.
Awesome.
For those that are interested.
Thank you.
Wow, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and I just looked up, I guess Dr. Madeline and I are on the same page because I looked it up too. And it says here, this is from the Pew Research Institution. The national average recidivism rate is 49.3%. Arizona's at 38.4%, according to the Pew Center. So probably you can find any statistics you like. But
Right. Thank you. Anyone else?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Reverend Oliver, for talking about Christian and Nigeria. You know, I know is so much suffering for Christian over there. Always Muslim is attacking Christian, and also I wanted to Christian persecution like in China, Pakistan, you know, and all over the world, you know. So we have to sometimes speak, and also Iran, you know, so many Christian in Iran too. So we have to, you know, we need to ask for a prayer, and you know, because there's a lot of persecution all over the world for Christian, you know. So we have to, sometime we need to talk about that one too. Not just Nigeria, is all over the world, especially China, Pakistan, and Afghanistan, and all over Middle East, basically. Iran too, you know. So thank you for speaking about it.
Heart-wrenching program we had today. Thank you so much for bringing that up. Anyone else like to share, open up any questions in regards to stopping the violence in America?
I just have a couple comments, if I might. Sorry, I don't have my camera on. I think Judge Alexander is Mr. Incentive. All three of the things he presented, there were such beautiful incentives, weren't they? And I
Yeah.
mean, that's like really respecting the parties that are involved. It's showing respect. So thank you very much. Also, is there anything as a legislator, is there anything where like governors get together or legislators get together and they share best practices? So some of these things can be presented, or are they just kind of, you know, best kept secrets?
Yeah, no, they definitely have meetings. There's the National Governors Association that meets regularly. And then there's legislative organizations, the National Center for State Legislatures, NCSL, where they gather and they share best practices. So that's definitely happens. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. They were great. A nice package. Anyone else?
Yes. Yes,
Yes.
I just want to comment on the life skills course that you give, and in any environment, even Dr. Alexander's husband, I think that is so important because any kind of education just will elevate, you know, their understanding and feeling of competence. And it's just, we have something we call character education that can also be included in that, you know, life skills, but also character education, and how, you know, good character, how does this come about? And anything in the area of education like that, I think is, you know, plus the skills, you know, learning these skills is just very, very valuable. I really appreciate the emphasis on that.
Yeah, thank you, Mary, for that as well. Anybody else like to elaborate on something or any other questions?
Looks like Patricia raised her hand.
Oh, Patricia, and then Leslie afterwards. Yes.
Yeah, I'm living in the Chicago area, and I've attended some programs previously, which the Nation of Islam was involved in. And I know that they do a lot of work within the prisons to help bring awareness of, you know, the nature of man, and, you know, they try to educate religiously as well. But I don't know exactly how they work together with the organizations once the, you know, people who are incarcerated come out. But I heard some amazing testimonies of people who, you know, were able to become CEOs of companies that previously were incarcerated. And I know other organizations work very hard to help this happen as well. But I was reading an article, and it was saying that recidivism rates across all races and ethnicities remains high, with 83 0.4% of people who were released in 2005 getting rearrested by 2014. So that's like across the board type thing. And of course, returning to prison after incarceration is more likely than not. So a program designed to prepare one for re-entry and reduce the future chance of arrest holds obvious appeals. I think that's, one way that they could prevent more violence, because obviously if within 10 years you're going to end up back in prison, no matter what your race is, obviously, I think we need to have more programs in place. And also mental health issues are not being addressed properly. They're just warehousing people that have all kinds of conditions that need attention. And that's why, of course, a lot of the people who commit crimes have mental illnesses and are out on the streets. And, so anyway, that's part of, I care about that a lot. So thank you for letting me share.
So true. Thank you. Leslie.
Yeah, I really appreciate all of your presentations, and it's quite amazing to see what one person can do as a state legislator and as a judge, and even as a citizen, as a pastor. My question is, on the news, we keep hearing of these people who are released right away from prison, and then they commit another crime, sometimes rather serious. I was wondering, how can we motivate these state people to put in place some of these programs? It just seems like it's kind of by state initiative, and there are states that are kind of wild, like California and what are some of the other ones, Illinois. And how can we reach them and kind of help things going in the right direction? I don't know. Any ideas?
Yeah. Floor is open.
Well, it's tricky because even when I was trying to pass the prison transition legislation, certain people have a philosophy that well, it's a political philosophy too. They don't want to be seen as soft on crime. So if you have a bill that helps people getting out of prison, then your future opponent could say, hey, my opponent is soft on crime. Look at him, he voted for this thing to help prisoners. So there's a certain mentality out there, which is driven by our current our partisan politicals, where you have to get beyond that in order to get good legislation often passed. So it is a bit tricky. And somebody mentioned incentives, and I think that's really, you have to use incentives for even working with legislators. For example, I had a marriage legislation to allocate $1 million for marriage skills training programs to help people have better marriages, right? It would seem to me make sense. Lower the divorce rate, okay? Lower the single families, all that stuff. So, but the people who opposed it were good people who were more sensitive to the issue of domestic violence. They were people like running domestic violence shelters. And they felt like if you have a bill promoting marriage, you're promoting a system that results in domestic violence. And it's old fashioned, or it's not going to work, or, whatever. They had, because of their experience, they had a sort of a legitimate objection. So what I did was I sat down with them and I said, well, how about this? Let's use some of the money to support domestic violence shelters, and let's require that every marriage skills program that we're funding has a section about domestic violence and how to prevent it and so forth. So with that, then they became supporters of the legislation and it was able to pass. So it is, there's a lot of there's a lot of different views out there about what works the best. And we have to just change our system is too hyper partisan now. It's so ineffective. People can't even talk to each other. That's a topic for another whole day, Reverend Oliver. We're going to have to come back and deal with that one.
Sure, you're absolutely invited back. Anyone else? As we come to the close.
And what I want to say to the community is, whatever your interest is, there's a door somewhere for you to knock on to become a part of that system. You have in your towns, in your cities, in your states, you have town hall meetings, you have mayors with open door policies. You can go to legislative hall. Whatever you're interested in that you want to support, there is a way to support it. Keep that in mind. Your public figures work for you.
Thank you. Absolutely. Yes, Reverend Franklin.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Alexander, for that comment. And, and also Judge Anderson, thank you. One of the things in which I'm so inspired, with Judge Anderson's last comment was the willingness to listen. And that really is a wonderful spiritual attribute to have. Going into any type of legislation, yes, we can have an intention in mind as we go forward in order to influence, I guess you can say, a able or God-centered policy in which we would like to be incorporated. And then at the same time, being open to other ideas, and then work in trying to create a pathway for other people's ideas that complement your initial intention. And that type of conversation, it's a fruit of our spiritual ability to be able to listen as well as work together and to craft a policy that is going to encompass all areas of public private healing that our society needs to incorporate. And hopefully what we can do is be the initiators to inspire this type of bipartisanship to occur so that we can quickly get to the path that's going to help us collectively create workable healing possibilities. So thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Franklin. Thank you again. We're coming to our close. I want to thank you, Mark. I want to thank you for coming on at the last minute. We did have the mayor of Kansas City coming, but because Kansas City had won the Super Bowl, so they asked him to be in a parade at this time, so he couldn't come. Yeah. We will have him, but Mark, he stepped to the plate. I'm glad you did, because for some reason, we've been on a platform for a couple of years, and I had no idea some of your background. So thank you so much, my friend, for coming on. And yes, come back. So we could hear like part 2 of the things that you're doing and impact that you're making. Please, if you like, please give us some closing remarks.
Okay, well, I would just say this. You never have to worry about me canceling because of a Super Bowl party, because I'm an Arizona Cardinals fan. So that will never be a problem for me. So feel free to call me anytime. No, I enjoyed today. It reminded me of some of the things that I've worked on in the past, and I am getting inspired by listening to you guys that I need to get back in there and get back in the arena. But it's been a pleasure, and there's a lot of good, as someone said, I think it was Dr. Alexander, that, oh no, maybe it was Daryl. Anyway, somebody said we can all make a difference, and there's places in our own communities where we can do that. I'm sure all of you on this call already are, because otherwise you wouldn't be on this call. But just thanks for inviting me, and God bless everybody.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Always thank you, Dr. Alexander. Always thank you so much for stepping up to the plate and always being an integral part of the conversation. God bless everyone. Again, Mark, I look forward to talking with you a little bit more. And I really appreciate those 3 points that you brought up. They were pertinent and they were imperative. Everybody, thank you so much again. I want to thank you, Reverend Franklin, always stepping to the plate. And John O'Connor, yes, thank you so much. He connected me. And I was wondering, Mark, why did Jim send me something about you? Because actually it was through John O'Connor that suggested you, but I get this email with Jim Edgerly's on the name. So I was a little befuddled. I didn't catch it. Yeah. We'll talk about that another time.
Yeah,
And then it was Mark Alexander, right? Not Mark Anderson, Mark Alexander. It's a good one.
Mark Alexander?
Mark Anderson is Madeline Alexander.
Yeah.
Did I say Mark? Did I say Alexander?
On the original program, it had Mark Alexander.
Oh my God. Anyway, I'm not going to tell you my age. I'll just leave it alone.
Like the rest of it. Not
Yeah,
young.
but anyway, Mark Anderson. I'm sorry if I got the names confused. But anyway, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure having you on. It's a pleasure. Thank you, John O'Connor. He's always there helping out in the background, calling me, Reverend Oliver, how can I help on this and how can I help on that?
We'll get
So I
our
want to
mayor on
thank you
next
so
time,
much.
for sure.
Yes, sir. All right. And again, God bless you. We will see you next week.
Thank you. God bless you all. Also,
Thank you,
awesome
Mary.
conversation, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Mark.
Patricia.
Remember his book is available on Amazon.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
There he is.
Oh, you got it.
Right
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Cool.
There you go.
Get that plug in.
Absolutely.
And New York Times best hit right now.
I'm telling you, there you go.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Very nice.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Bye, Bill.
Okay.
Uh,
God bless
Judge
everyone.
Anderson.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
We
Thank you.
Bye-bye.